we have spent a significant period of time learning about plagiarism and how to avoid it. So naturally, we are going to finish by having a plagiarism quiz. But not to worry, I am going to tell you exactly what you need to ace your quiz. So this video is going to be on how to ace your plagiarism quiz. Now, I will say that there are not going to be any surprises. I'm not going to try to trick you. I just want to make sure that you know and understand this material and that you know how to apply it so that plagiarism will never be something you have to think about ever again, right? You're never going to get caught in my class or in any other class or in the professional environment. You're never going to get caught plagiarizing, especially if you do it accidentally. It's really embarrassing to do it accidentally. We want to avoid all that, right? So we're going to take a quiz just to make sure that everyone has learned everything and that we can safely move on without this being a problem in the future. Okay, so there is going to be 3 parts to your plagiarism quiz. And because I am so nice, I am even going to provide you with those 3 parts and what the quiz is going to say, the questions that it's going to ask you. What I'm not going to give you is the exact references, that the exact sources that you're going to use to do your examples and to kind of fill in the quiz with, right? But I will tell you what's going to be asked of you on the quiz. Okay, so it's going to be 3 different parts. The quiz is 3 different parts. So the first part is going to be rules and definitions. Rules and definitions. So to get your rules and definitions, you need to go back to a previous video that talked about the 3 rules of how to give credit to a source. Okay, so these are the 3 rules of how do you avoid plagiarism. How do you avoid plagiarism if you want to use someone else's words? How do you avoid plagiarism if you want to use your own words, but you've used as your foundation the thoughts, ideas, and concepts from someone else? And what if you want to use someone's words that also include their thoughts, ideas, and concepts, right? What are the rules for each of those? Okay, so you need to know those, you need to memorize them. You need to commit them to heart. Remember, you're going to use this for many years to come, for the rest of your life, definitely the rest of your academic life. You need to memorize them. Okay, for me, for my quiz, I'm not going to grade you based on like word by word, like it has to be verbatim, but if you do commit them to memory, you'll be able to put them onto paper a lot faster, and you don't have to worry about forgetting or having to try to put it in your own words as you're sitting for the quiz, right? The faster you can do it and the easier and the flawless, you'll just be more confident. I suggest just memorizing these. And no, it is not plagiarism. I am telling you to memorize it. Okay, I'm telling you to memorize it. It's not a research paper, it's a quiz, but I'm giving you the definition that I want you to use. I'm giving you the rule. Use it verbatim if you can memorize it. If not, put it in your own words as close as you can, but I suggest you memorize it. Okay, so again, the definition of how to avoid plagiarism if you're using someone else's words, how to avoid plagiarism if you're putting it in your own words, but using someone else's thoughts, ideas, and concepts, and what is the rule if you're using both. A combination of words and thoughts, ideas, and concepts, okay, from someone other than yourself. So I'm going to start in part 1 by asking you for the definitions. And of course, I will ask you to give me the definition of plagiarism. Okay, so if we're going to avoid plagiarism, first we need to be able to define it. Okay, so give me the rule or the definition for plagiarism as well. That will be part number 1. And then any other definitions that I'm going to ask you for, I will give you the printout of the quiz ahead of time so that you can know and work on all of those rules for your memorization. Okay? Again, I'm not trying to trick you. I'm going to give you everything that you need to ace your quiz. It's just up to you to memorize it, to learn it, and to know how to apply it. Okay, part 2 is going to be a yes or no and explain. I'm going to give you a bunch of examples of passages that either are plagiarized or are not plagiarized. And I will ask you, is the below passage plagiarized or not plagiarized, and explain. So you will look at each passage and you will say, yes, this is plagiarized because, and give the reasons, right? Here you want to apply the facts right, from the exact passage and apply it to the rule or the definition, right? If you're one of my legal students, you know how to do your analysis in your IRAC, right? This would be the analysis. You're applying the facts and the rule to reach your conclusion. So if you're saying yes or no, that's a conclusion, right? How did you reach that conclusion? How did you reach that conclusion? You went back to the definition from part 1, right? And you applied it to the facts of the example that you're given to decide whether or not it was plagiarism. For example, if I were to give you a passage and you were to look at the printout, so you'll be given an article or some other kind of printout to know you'll be able to see the original, and then you'll be able to see what is listed, and then you'll compare the two and figure out if it's plagiarized. So let's say that I copy and pasted verbatim and I did not do a quote, a cite or reference, and we know those 3 things are required because why? We go back to the definition of using someone else's words, right? Or their words, thoughts, ideas, and concepts. It's the same rule, right? But if we copy and paste verbatim, we're using their words and their thoughts, ideas, and concepts, right? Because we've taken everything. We've copied and pasted verbatim. We have made any changes. Nothing is our own. Everything is the author's, right? It's their words, it's their thoughts, their ideas, their concepts. Everything belongs to someone other than ourselves. So if I ask you if that was plagiarism, you would say yes, because you're smart. You know that you have to apply those 3 elements. How do you know that, right? Go back to the rule. The rule is if you want to use someone else's words and someone else's thoughts, ideas, and concepts, you must give them credit by using quotations, citation, and reference, right? Those 3 things. If my example does not give you all 3 things, then the answer is yes, it is plagiarized. What if I give you a quotation and a citation, just the 2? Well, you've watched all the videos, you know that if you don't have 3 as the definition requires, it's plagiarism, right? If I do a citation or reference but not the quotation, it's plagiarism. If I do a reference and a citation, it's plagiarism, right? You have to have all 3. That's why they're elements. So I'm going to be testing, did you really know the definition? And is it that you memorized the definition but you haven't given any thought as to how to apply it, right? It doesn't do anyone any good if you can cite that. If you want to use anyone else's words, you have to give them credit by quotation, citation, and reference, but you don't know what any of that means. Like you don't know how to apply quotation marks, or you don't know how to properly cite, or you don't know how to properly do a reference. Knowing that rule or the definition is not going to do anyone any good, right? So in part 1, I'm asking, do you know the definition? Do you know the rule, right? Have you memorized it? Do you know it? Part 2 is I'm saying, can you apply it? Can you apply it if you see it? If you see it, can you identify it, right? And you would go back to the video where I gave the 6 examples from the 6 different ways to plagiarize. So I took the 6 ways to plagiarize video, and then the next video after that is I gave examples for each of those 6, or for 5 of the 6, because the 6th one is you get someone else to do the homework for you. So this is saying, if you see it, can you identify it, right? This is what we do as professors. Like we see it, we identify it because we know the rules. We know what is plagiarism. We can spot it, and we can spot it relatively easily, right? Most of the time we don't need software. Like it's very obvious. We can spot it. Can you spot it? If you do it accidentally, can you spot it? Okay. So in part 1, give the rules or the definitions. Part 2 is yes, no, and explain. So go back up to your rule and then say yes or no, and then because, and then you would use the rules, right? You can say because using someone else's words, you have to quote, cite, and reference. And in this example, they only did a quotation and a citation and not a reference. Therefore, yes, it is plagiarism. Right? And don't worry, you do not have to be a legal student. If I ask any other students, or if you're watching and you're in a completely different program and you have absolutely no idea about the law, that is completely okay. You essentially do the same thing, and most of us instinctually do that anyways. you would just want to say yes or no based on, did it meet the 3 elements, right? Or did it meet, if it's just thoughts, ideas, and concepts, did it meet the requirement of the 2 elements, right? Or the 2 required things, right? If it's words, quote, cite, reference. If it's just thoughts, ideas, and concepts, cite and reference, right? So you can, in any program, whatever it is that you're studying, you can apply this. Okay, part 3 is going to be to write your own plagiarism-free passages. So I'm going to give you a source and I'm going to tell you what I'd like you to talk about, and you're going to have to write your own sentences or whatever length of passage I ask you to without plagiarizing. Okay, so again, that means if you're using someone else's words, you're only using the most important words. Okay, and you're going to quote, cite, and reference, but you need to know how to do those, right? If you quote and it's done improperly, it's plagiarism. If you cite improperly, it's plagiarism. If you reference improperly, it's plagiarism. So you not only need to know how to do those, but you need to know how to do them correctly, especially for the quiz. If you do it on a research paper and you give your best attempt and you cite wrong, it's likely that your professor is not going to fail you for plagiarism. It's likely that that it will be revealed to them that maybe you haven't learned the right way, or that you are still trying to practice learning how to not plagiarize. It's still plagiarism, but if it's obvious that you're not trying to plagiarize, it's just you're trying to do it right and you just haven't quite got the hang of it, we'll probably use it as a teachable moment, but it's still plagiarism. Okay, it needs to be done correctly. So you have to use quotation marks the right way. Go back to the video that talks about examples on how to do it the right way. And then you have to do proper quotation marks, you have to do proper in-text citation, also called an inline citation, and you have to do a proper reference. Okay, all of those have to be correct. And as a note, when you do the reference, it's a list of all the needed information for someone to go and find your source, how they can look it up and find exactly, like pinpoint the exact location, the exact spot that you are getting your information from. If you're looking at a textbook or a long collaboration of material, in the back of that book, it will likely have a reference section. That is not what you're using. Just to make that perfectly clear, if you're brand new to references, maybe get a little extra help or tell your professor that you need help with understanding how to do a reference list for your essay, and they'll be more than happy to help you or point you in the right direction to maybe point out some resources for you. But don't go to the back of the textbook or the back of the encyclopedia or the back of some other book that is going to have a reference section. That is going to reference all the little pieces of information that they're talking about in their book. Likely it'll be things like cases or statistics or other things that they're getting information from, so they're providing a reference on where they're getting their information. A lot of people that write textbooks need to get some wisdom from somewhere else. Like, I don't know anyone that could sit down and write a giant textbook completely from their own brain without getting references. So they're not plagiarizing in their textbook because they're doing a reference list at the back of their textbook to tell you all the places that they got their references. And if you look, most of the time it will be dozens and dozens and dozens of pages, right? Because we know as professionals, we don't know everything, and we need to go to people that do have more wisdom than us to get the wisdom, right? So your textbooks are also going to do these same 2 or 3 things to avoid plagiarism as well. Okay, they have to set a good example. So just to make that perfectly clear, again, if you need help learning how to do a quotation, like how to put them in the proper spot, or to do an in-text citation, or to a reference, ask your professor well before your assignment is due. If you email them an hour before it's due, or a couple hours before, or maybe the day before, it depends on how long it takes your professor to respond to you, it's not going to be enough time. It's not going to be enough. You're not going to have time to learn the material. And even if they tell you, likely you'll still need time to do all your writing. And again, you don't want to try to learn that when it's right before it's due. Okay, so just to kind of throw that out there in case there was any confusion. So that is part number 3. You're going to write your own plagiarism-free passage. So I will give you a source and tell you to write a sentence or 2 sentences or a paragraph, and you need to do it without plagiarizing. Okay, so again, everything goes back to the definition or the rule. Everything goes back to the rule. If you know the rule for how to avoid plagiarism, if you know what plagiarism is, and you can put it to use, you can actually do it in application, you will do great on the quiz. So let me know if you have any questions, but that will be your quiz. It will be 3 parts. I will ask you for definitions. I will ask you to say yes or no and explain, and I will ask you to write your own plagiarism-free passage. Okay, really, really great job. I cannot wait to see how you do on your quizzes.